In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the channel. I am the Archivist Premier. Now, this is a test demo video on future lore videos, more rather to test format and editing and stuff. Everything going forward here will be much more fluid, hopefully, as we develop style. But the point of today's video is to bring you a rough pre-heresy history of the Adeptus Mechanicus, or as they were known at the time, the Mechanicum. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you very much for listening. To begin, in the modern Imperium, the Adeptus Mechanicus is a vast organization of men and women devoted to the theological ideology of the Omnissiah and charged with the production of the Imperium's engines of war. They are holders of an ancient, much revered, and yet equally feared technological and scientific heritage, reaching back into the very dawning days of mankind. They are the last bastion of science, high technology, and logic in an Imperium ruled by madness, faith, and doubt. Yet that is not to say that the adepts of the Mechanicus are the bright-minded individuals of science in our own era. The knowledge of the Mechanicus is a twisted thing, scarred and brutalized by millennia of ignorance, stagnation, regression, and superstition. The logic of that far distant time is not that of the Aristotelian fashion, but rather one of dogmatic and fixed conclusions and predefined results. Intuition and the technological innovation derived from it are seen as heresy of the most dangerous kind, deviation from the divine mechanism of the Omnissiah, and is punished with extreme prejudice. Not only that, but much knowledge has been lost since the dark age of technology, and there are many gaps in the Mechanicus' archives, incomplete STCs, and corrupt data stacks, the machine spirits within too disquieted to risk unleashing upon creation. As the 42nd millennium opens, and the Imperium faces a new age of war led by the reborn Primarch Guilliman, the Adeptus Mechanicus is faced with the challenges like never before. With the opening of the Circuitrix Maledictum, and the loss of the worlds of the Imperium Nihilus, the Mechanicus is called upon as never before to raise production and to arm the armies of man. Day and night across 1,000 forges on 1,000 worlds, labourers and menials toil endlessly to meet production quotas, driven to ever greater levels of production by calculating cold masters, more steel than flesh. A dark age beckons, and the Mechanicus must make mankind ready to meet it. Yet this is not that tale. This is the tale of the Adeptus Mechanicus' birth. Though the Adeptus Mechanicus maintains countless numbers of forge worlds across the Imperium, there is only one who stands above all others as the single greatest manufacturing hub and scientific research station in the Imperium, the Red World of Mars. The second planet to be colonized after Terra's moon, Luna, Mars was originally settled by industrial cartels from Earth, eager to exploit the rich natural resources of the planet compared to the dwindling supplies of man's cradle world. It did not take long for the abundance of scientific knowledge on the planet to lead it to be considered one of the foremost of mankind's worlds, and throughout the dark age of technology, Terra and Mars would vie for power as equals amongst the confederacy of man. As the millennia passed, Mars was fundamentally altered. Great atmosphere processes and oxygen manufactoria were raised, pumping clouds of Earth-like gases into the Martian skies, thickening the atmosphere and making the air breathable. For a brief time, Mars was as green and blue as Terra, and two gems nestled together in the heavens. Yet all that would change. With the onset of the Age of Strife, the collapse of galactic communications, the rampant increase in psychoproliferation, and the sudden upsurge of warp storms across mankind's domains, the Confederacy of Man fell into chaos. Little knowledge remains known of that time, and those records that do remain are often contradictory, even in their own recounting, and at worst are heretical revisions left by those intending to foul the history of man with vile rumour and insidious lies. Mars, despite its ascendancy within the Confederacy, found itself suddenly isolated from the wider civilization of man, even from those planets within the Sol system. A highly developed manufactoria world, Mars only provided the basic amenities to its population, with many vital civilian goods and food supplies being brought in from off-world. Even with the exceptional technology of the time, no solutions could be found. Societal collapse followed almost instantaneously, as wars broke out to secure the remains of stockpiles of resources on the planet. Precise details of the conflict are unknown, but if the surface of Mars, even in its present day, is to be taken as any indicator, The wars were fierce in the extreme. The Martian surface is littered with the skeletal remains of once vast hive cities, and pocked with dozens of atomic craters. Even the great atmosphere factories fell into disrepair and ruin, and what had taken centuries to create was lost in mere decades, as stellar winds blew away the surface gases, the native Martian gravity too weak to retain such a thick atmosphere. The oceans dried, plant life withered, and with it, all surface life on Mars came to an end. Only those who'd managed to retreat to fortified complexes deep beneath the surface stood any chance of surviving the devastation above. Yet perhaps those who had died were fortunate, for those who lived were faced with the horror of daily survival upon a barren, irradiated orb, abandoned by the rest of mankind. Of the original name of the organization that would become the Mechanicus, we cannot say, but it is a guarantee that these bunkers are where their origins lie after the collapse of Mars. One of a few groups of survivors faced with desperate odds in their bid to stay alive. It can be speculated that the Admech's religious devotion to technology perhaps has its basis in these times, trapped underground in a world of artificial light, recycled air, and processed gruel for food, where the failure of even a single piece of machinery could prove catastrophic, and their most efficient, productive upkeep was seen as something to be lauded and praised. Just as a man of modern era imbues with his consciousness a sense of personality and individual being into the objects he holds in close regard, so did the foundations of the concept of a machine spirit find its roots in the unique and peculiar temperaments of the machines they sought to maintain. Thus, in this way, did the simple act of maintenance transition from that of a technician replacing and repairing parts, to the beginnings of priests supplicating and entreating their engines to awaken through holy code and sacred wrench. Regardless, this unnamed organization's unusual quirk for revering machines they sought to control for their own survival must have lent them a great advantage over their fellows, for the Adeptus Mechanicus, or, as it was known in its ancient Pre-Heresy title, the Mechanicum, swiftly rose to prominence on Mars, utilizing scavenge technology and fierce, zealot-like devotion to their emerging god, the Omnissiah, to contest, dominate, and eventually conquer the territories of their rivals, until, sometime in the 27th millennium, the Mechanicum had achieved global hegemony over Mars, ruling via a technocratic class in which those with access to the greatest technology, power, and resources demanded fealty from their smaller vassal forges in exchange for protection and access to their technological secrets. During this time of peace, the Mechanicus sought to reclaim and consolidate that which they could from the ruins of the ancient cities, seeking to better their lives and reach closer singularity with the machine god by acquiring the knowledge to unlock those treasures still hidden within the crumbling ruins. Many secrets were recovered during this time, with many near-complete and fully functional STC printouts being triumphantly returned to the larger forges, there to be studied and praised as living conduits of the Omnissiah. So too was a faint spark of hope ignited, that maybe the knowledge of the ancients could be reclaimed, and, with enough devotion, mankind could return to its former ascendancy and unite with the machine god. Many great works were constructed during this period. The famed Titan legions of Mars walked during this period, not STC constructs of old, but machines fully developed and maintained by the Titanicus, an order of tech priests in princeps who were charged with maintaining the god engines and piloting them into battle, their spirits bonded with their mounts via the throne Mechanicum. So too did the first pieces of the famous Ring of Iron rise into orbit, an echo of the ancient days when Mars was ringed by many such fabulous starports. Work was begun on restarting the atmosphere factories, and, for a time, starships even left the Ring of Iron to venture out into the galaxy, between lulls in the warp storms, and, if they survived, settled new worlds in the images of Mars, transforming them into barren, smog-wreathed planets that would become known as Forge Worlds. The Mechanicum even raided Terra itself on occasion, ignoring the petty techno-barbarians that warred across the cradle world's surface like ants, to instead plunder those places in the ancient age where man had unlocked sciences that had made him godlike, stealing back to Mars that which they found with bitter jealousy. Thus did things continue, until, with the birth cries of Slanesh ringing through the immaterium, the warp storms subsided, leaving a galaxy breathed in flame, and the pulsing reality wound that would one day become known as the Eye of Terror. Seeing his best chance to right the path of mankind, the being known as the Emperor finally revealed himself upon the cradle world of Terror, creating his Adeptus Custodes and beginning the process of unification. After the death of the final Thunder Warrior at the Battle of Mount Ararat, the Emperor finally deemed Terra secured and set his sights on the distant red orb of Mars. Venturing across the system, the Emperor would descend to the Martian surface at Olympus Mons, the highest terrestrial peak in the solar system, where, in an impressive display of psychic power and an intimate understanding of the Martian faith, the Emperor caused it to rain on Mars for the first time in millennia, as the atmosphere was not thick enough to support a functioning Hydra system. The Emperor's arrival upon Mars began an instant schism within the faith. Some believed that the Emperor was the physical manifestation of the Omnissiah, his arrival being prophesied by several sects of the Mechanicum as a preordained mathematical conclusion of the universe. Others, however, noted that the Emperor came with the promise of peace offered in one hand, but in the other he held the mailed fist of his Space Marine legions, and knew that if they were to refuse his offer of alliance with Terra in his newly forged Imperium, then surely Mars would be devastated, and whatever works remained would be wholly repurposed to the Emperor's war machine. Realizing this most implicit threat, Kelbor Hall, the then fabricated general of Mars and de facto head of the Mechanicum, conceded to the Emperor of Mankind, and Mars became the first world to be inducted into the Imperium of Man. In time, the schism of faith ignited by the possibility of the Emperor's divinity would leave bitter enmities within the Mechanicum, and come the time of their heresy prove deadly. But that is for another time. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that was my first video. I'd like to thank my friend Tactical Keeper for doing the editing. You'll find the link to his channel down below in the description. It really would not have been possible without him. If you have anything you'd like to add, any thoughts, any comments, any criticism, be sure to leave a comment. Everything is accepted. Thank you and have a good day.